Welcome to the Projector Podcast. I'm Jeremy Glowacki, Editor-in-Chief of ProjectorCentral. On this week's episode, Sammie Prescott joins us from Colorado Springs to discuss his recent review of the Sony Bravia Projector 7, also known as the VPL XW5100 in custom install channels. Featuring a more refined set of features and improved performance, the Projector 7 is priced at basically $10,000 MSRP. It's sitting just below the Bravia 8 and above the entry-level XW5000 for Sony, giving potential buyers more options to suit their needs. Two features that really are worth mentioning is a new one currently exclusive to this model called aspect ratio scaling. This feature allows a 16:9 image to be scaled down so it fits properly within a cinemascope screen. Also, with the XR processor, like its more expensive year-old Projector 9 and 8 predecessors, the Bravia Projector 7 supports advanced features such as XR dynamic tone mapping, XR deep black, XR Triluminos Pro, XR clear image, and enhanced brightness. It also has for gamers the lowest input latency in its class at just 11 milliseconds when running 4K at 120 hertz, along with support for ALLM, auto low latency mode. But alas, for fans of 3D movies, you need not apply. There is no 3D support in the Projector 7. I know that comes up a lot, so I have to mention it out of the gate. So just how well does the processor and the Projector 7 analyze color, clarity, focal point, contrast, and motion for greater image depth and clarity? That's what today's guest, Sammie Prescott, is here to tell us about. Sammie, thanks for taking the time out of your day to talk to us. How are you doing
Thanks
today?
for having me again.
You're welcome. So we saw each other in person finally.
Yes.
Been virtual up until September when we were both at CEDIA Expo, and there you were all of a sudden, and we met. Interviewed you for my little wrap-up, which we've posted, so check that out if you haven't seen our CEDIA hour-long video. But the last I saw you, you were sitting, you didn't see me, you were sitting down on the floor in the upper lobby on Friday, taking a break finally, maybe having lunch, talking to somebody, and I was running to the airport to only find out my flight was delayed, so big deal, right? So how was your CEDIA Expo? How did you deal with all your obligations there?
CEDIA was good. It's always a very busy, kind of hectic time, and not just during CEDIA, but like leading up to it, kind of getting everything prepped in terms of making sure everything is updated, everything's working, everything's kind of staged, and then getting it, up to CEDIA, because sometimes a lot of stuff might come to me since I'm in Colorado, and it's easier to sometimes send things to me than it is to, ship it to CEDIA and have like Freeman take care of it. But overall, it was good. It was long days. I mean, you get there, and depending on what you're doing, it's just kind of constant back and forth. So like a lot of times people might have seen me just kind of like walking around, and that's because I was heading from like one booth to a different booth. So like, for instance, when we ran to each other, I was there at that booth, helping them with something with the MAVR. So it was good though. Overall, I enjoyed going to CEDIA.
So the company that kind of pays your way to be there is MAVR. Is that correct? Kind of like their main client that you're working for?
Yeah. So I will do some work with them. And in that particular instance, because I have my own company, so I can go as just an attendee if I wanted to, which I do. I always have my own badge as well. But in that case, I'm there as an exhibitor underneath their company. So then I'll help them with setup and going to their different booth partners that have NVs in their demos. And making sure that they're all set up right. And if they have any issues or any questions, helping them with that. Okay.
And you mentioned when we were talking that you had some road work ahead of you going out and doing calibrations, I'm assuming. So where were you all? I know you don't reveal clients, but where were you headed to different cities and states?
CEDIA, what was it? CEDIA ended on Saturday. I basically had Sunday to kind of get things in order. And then that Monday I left to Louisiana, and I was working in Baton Rouge.
Wow. Okay.
And then I came back later that week, and then I had some stuff in Colorado, but up towards Fort Collins. So I did some stuff up
Mm,
there. And now my next ones are I'll be in Virginia, and then I will be in Texas after that.
great.
Yeah.
And are you doing all projectors, or are you doing TVs and projectors when you're out there on the road?
So Baton Rouge was a Christie projector.
Mm,
Fort Collins was OLED, a QD OLED.
okay.
I have another OLED that I need to do, and then I actually got my own. I got a different OLED because I just kind of rotate TVs around my house. So I have a 83G5 that I need to take care of, but that has to wait.
Mhm.
And then when I am in Virginia and in Texas, I'll be doing Barco Heimdall, and I also
Mm,
might have to go to South Carolina as well for another one. So I
okay.
do a little bit of everything, but primarily it's a lot of projection and video processors.
Yeah, we talked about the Barco when we were at CEDIA together, and I did end up talking to them. So that's a favorite of yours. It sounds like
Yeah,
when it comes
it's
to
a
your
nice
team.
projector.
So you are working? Are you contracted mostly with integrators on these jobs, or are they direct to the consumer that have found you? Or
It's a little bit of both.
okay,
So some of the larger installs, especially when you're looking at things like the Christies and the Barcos,
yeah,
that's usually I've been reached out to by the actual integrator and dealer.
sure,
When it comes to like a lot of the televisions or sometimes the smaller projectors, not necessarily the inexpensive, but just say smaller projectors, because they
yeah,
can still cost upwards to 30 grand. But a lot of times those will be direct to the consumer as well.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, since the last time you and I spoke or saw each other, I've actually attended ISF training in St. Petersburg, Florida, and you and I talked offline a little bit about that, and so now the main upshot is that as I read your reviews, like this one we're going to talk about today, and you get into the actual calibration, it makes a lot more sense to me, which is great. I've been on the job since January, and I know enough to get through an edit, but I don't always completely understand how your process works. Now I get it, and as you say in one of your reviews, there aren't that many who calibrate at that level. So what we're doing is a service to a small percentage of people that are really into it. But it's good that we have it for these high level projectors, especially in the home theater space. Primarily, that's where you're going to have that done. We'll mostly just talk about features and performance here, obviously, in our conversation, because you get in the minutia, the actual calibration. That's something that's easier to read about than probably speak about. But get out of the gate. I actually saw this projector in New York at a Sony press preview event. So Projector 7 was in one of the first that I kind of got to experience in my new job firsthand before we did a review. You reviewed the Projector 9 back in 2024. So that's a higher price point projector, higher brightness.
Right.
But you didn't do the 8 because it's kind of just a step down. We decided 7 would be good just because it's like that difference. Maybe we can just talk about why you thought the 7 was a good one to review to kind of contrast with the others in the line there.
So when it comes to projector lines like that have, whether it be, so let's just stick with Sony. So you have the 5000, you have the 5100, 6100, 7100, or sorry, or Bravia is 789. Let's say that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, when you have that, when you have that type of line, usually you don't have that many features that differentiate it from one another. And really what makes them different is effectively brightness for the most part, this actual lumens. Sometimes you might get a few different features here and there, but really the problem is that if you were to, there's nothing to say that you can't, because you might find that the middle one might perform or exceed expectations and punch above its weight limit.
Mm-hmm.
But generally the problem is that there's a lot of redundancy. So like for instance, if you look at the Bravia 8 projector and the Bravia 9 projector, really there's two differences between it. There's really only two differences. One is the 9 has a live color and it's brighter. That's really it. Like in terms of performance, they do exactly pretty much the same thing. But when you look at the 7 to the 9, that's a larger kind of disparity. Mm-hmm. So like if someone were looking at, say, for instance, a 7 or an 8, they could read the 9 and say, okay, it's going to perform roughly like between the two. It's definitely brighter than the 7. It's not as bright as the 9, and it doesn't have live color. Mm-hmm. In terms of what live color does, is it kind of basically just increases color luminance and saturation a little bit. In terms of like accuracy, most people probably wouldn't use it. I mean, some people might use it just because they like it, but it's not something that's going to be like, oh, this is a night and day difference. If you were to go from like 8 to a 9 outside of one just being brighter. So usually kind of not doing every single one is kind of better because it's really redundant. Yeah. And also this is probably more selfish on my part. It makes it really hard to write about. Yeah, because there is so much redundancy. Yeah. Not that you can't, it's just difficult.
Even between the 9 and the 7, I was back to, reviewing, because I didn't edit your 9 review. That was my predecessor, Rob Saban. So I went back and read that. And as I compared the two, there are feature areas that you kind of have like I'm not going to say copy and paste, but they were
it's going to be similar. Basically similar because the feature set it really is the same. So the best thing you could do really in those instances is really bring light or call out the differences. Yeah. And there's enough differences between the 7 and the 9, where it's like all manual controls, you have the auto aspect scaling, etc. Where if you did that with the 8 and the 9, it's going to be a lot harder. It's like, well, you could write the review saying it's not as bright as a 9. And it doesn't have live color, and call it a day if you really wanted to.
Yeah. And I mean, and so you look at it now, the 7 and what the point of it is, and it's to lower the price point, I'm assuming, and still be within this Bravia range that they're trying to achieve. And you have the new, the XR processor at this price point for Sony. And that's an important ingredient because of what it can achieve. And maybe we can talk a little bit about dynamic tone mapping and deep black and all that stuff that it brings to it. So lower light, shadow detail, that kind of performance, right, is what you're achieving here for the 10K projector.
Yeah. So, I mean, comparing it to, say, the XW5000 and then the 5100 or the Bravia 7, they're, at first glance, they're effectively look like the same projector. They definitely look like it, and to a point they even perform like it due to like the manual controls and so on. But where the previous series really struggled was their tone mapping. So if you put in 0 Dark 30, if you put in Blade Runner when he visits the protein or the farmer's house in the beginning, and just different content, you would effectively have to make changes in the menu to get a watchable picture. Not that it wasn't watchable, but to get something that was a little bit more pleasant, I guess you would say. And the problem is that you can change it, but it would only be good for that scene. And then the next scene, it would be kind of not great again. So you'd have to change it again. So most people would end up sticking to what's going to work effectively, relatively best for everything, and just kind of leave it there without having to ride the remote. So what the Bravia 7 added is they added their new tone mapping. So when they changed their processor over to the XR, they're effectively using the same tone mapping that is available within their direct view displays. So like their Bravia 8 Mark II, like their OLED, their A95L, etc. So they're basically using that tone mapping. So now you can effectively set it up and never really have to touch it again. And then the way they do it is it's pretty smart because you have your HDR enhancer where you basically set low, middle, or high. And what that does is that determines how it tracks the EOTF. So now as you've been eyes up, you've probably seen that EOTF. So it's that graph that goes basically from zero, like this, to effectively 10,000 nits. That's the cap, but usually you'll see it clip to whatever, 1,000, 4,000, whatever. So that determines where it tracks in relation to the EOTF. So you can say, okay, I want it a little bit brighter in the midtones, or I want it accurate, or I want it to under track to be a little bit darker. So that's what that does. But then they added basically the HDR mode, where it's mode 1, 2, and 3, where that determines the roll off. For instead of it like hard clipping, you could say, okay, I want it to roll off more shallow, or I want it to hard clip, or I want it to kind of try to like over track just a little bit. So by using those in combination, you can kind of craft a picture that says, all right, I want it to be 100% accurate, which is probably what, not probably, that's what someone would see if they use the settings that are in the review. It's going to be more towards accuracy. But if someone says, I want to sacrifice a little bit of highlights for like a brighter picture, or highlight detail for brighter picture, they can do that, and they can just choose a different setting. But the good thing is that they can just leave it. Once you set it, it will like just work. Because with the previous one, if you were to say watch Aquaman, you'd be fine. And then let's say you're going to go and watch Zero Dark 30 right afterwards, it's going to struggle. It would 100% struggle. Now it can do Zero Dark 30 fairly well. It can't do it the greatest because that scene requires super high contrast, but it has high enough contrast where it's going to look better than pretty much most things out there, and it can actually resolve the detail. So they did really well with their new tone mapping. So that's kind of one of the things that you're getting when you get the 5100.
You talk about another aspect of this projector and the fact that one of the cost savings other than light output is the manual controls, which you didn't have in the 9. That saves costs because you're not using motorized, internal controls or the remote control. But you said that it would have been really irritating had it not been for this new feature called aspect ratio scaling, which I understand what it means, and I think you could probably explain it very easily. But it's basically hopping between 16:9 and 235 to 1 or cinemascope by using basically a button press. So you can do that remotely versus having to go in and manually adjust that on the projector. But everything else, like focus and zoom and all that, it's manual, correct?
Yeah, so all the controls are manual. So focus, zoom, and lens shift are all manual. The focus is pretty good on it. The zoom is pretty good on it as well. The lens shift is not really that good. It moves. So ideally, if you have something that is a manual control, you're usually going to have some type of lever or dial or wheel or something that you would move. The idea is that they're tight enough that they're not going to drift or like kind of slowly move over time, but they're smooth in its operation. So focus and zoom are pretty smooth, but the lens shift is not. Like when you go to move it, it's very, very tight and it moves in steps. So it's too coarse. So it's not like the greatest implementation of it. I mean, I understand it as a cost savings, but that was also an issue with the 5000, and it still persists with the 5100. I'm not a huge fan of manual controls. Well, actually, let me rephrase that. I don't mind manual controls as long as it makes sense. And to me, manual controls in a $10,000 projector don't make sense.
Yeah, and that's where I was when I was rereading the review, and you said that there were certain things that, well, you mentioned the high price point as a con, and you're listing at the top of the review, and I thought, oh, compared to what? And then as I read the review, you said basically there are $10,000 competitors out there that do have, non-manual, I guess, like remote
Yeah, you have
control,
full motorized
full
controls. So
motorized control. Yeah.
like when you compare it to the 5,000, which was significantly cheaper, well, relatively, right? Um, in comparison to this, it was cheaper, or say less expensive. And you have this one, which is almost exactly the same thing. It's brighter. True. You do have HDMI 2.1. You have the auto aspect. You have better tone mapping. Like you have a lot of great quality of life and just straight performance over the 5,000. So it
Mm.
is 100% a better projector. But my issue with it, and this is more of a personal thing, like some people will be totally fine with it because it is a really, really good projector. And it
Mhm.
is also in line with the pricing of competitors with where you can slightly get more features or different features that are not offered, right? So overall, it's kind of still within where it should be when you look at the landscape.
Mhm.
My only issue is that again, I would personally have a problem with paying $10,000 for something that has motorized controls.
Fair.
The
Yeah.
good thing is that they at least, and this is very smart of them, and I wish it was in the Bravia 8 and Bravia 9. They had the foresight to say, okay, people want to use this with the scope screen, so a 240.
Mhm.
So your aspect ratios are like 16 by 9, 189, 190, 2.0, 2.2, 235, 237, 240, and then you start getting the super wide stuff that's most people don't have a screen like that. So let's say a scope screen being 240. So it looks like your letterbox.
Yeah.
Usually what would happen is if you had a projector with motorized controls, you could set a lens memory and you could say,
Yeah.
okay, zoom in to fill my screen widthwise, and then the black bars would just be off the top and the bottom, and you won't see them because you're watching it on a scope screen. And then when you watch 16 by 9, you would zoom it in so that it would fit height wise.
Mhm.
You can't really do that with something with motorized controls, or I'm sorry, with manual
Manual.
controls.
Right.
So what they did is they basically made it so that if you zoom it all the way out, and it's the only downside is that it really considers two aspect ratios.
Yeah.
I want to say it was 235, but maybe it was 240. I'd have to look at it again, but it's one of those two aspect ratios. You zoom it out to fill it widthwise, and then when you're ready, you can go into the menu or even just hit the button on the remote, change it to the auto aspect scaling, and if it's 16 by 9, it'll automatically just scale it down, and it will fit height wise.
Mhm.
So it's a really, really nice feature. It's a really cool feature. If it were automatic, it would make it even better because right now you do have to interact with the remote to engage it. But
Yeah.
just for the fact that they added it, that's a really thoughtful like design. That was actually like a really good feature.
So when you talk about manual controls in this projector, what is your experience as a end user then in terms of how many times you might need to deal with those controls after you've initially set up the projector? I know that certain content can kind of skew, and you might need to make some adjustments on alignment and things like that. But you're not typically
um,
refocusing. You're not typically.
yeah, you're not generally refocusing. You're not generally changing the shift, whether it be horizontal or vertical. So at the same time, even though I complain about it probably more than I should, it's once you set it, you generally don't have to touch it again. It's
Yeah,
just
just
that,
that initial start point.
yeah, it's just kind of like, it's manual. And then it's kind of like, it's manual and the lens shift doesn't work that great. Like
Yeah.
if it were really, really smooth, if it were tight, really, really smooth, and it wasn't so have like such like hard steps and like so coarse, I probably wouldn't have complained about it as much. And I probably should
Okay.
have stopped complaining about it. But it was pretty annoying.
Yeah, and it's like you have your setup, and if you're mounted on the ceiling, then you're up on a ladder doing all this stuff too, right? So it's not a great experience having to deal with all the manual stuff during setup. It's just once you're done, you hopefully don't have to go back and deal with it again. But
Yeah, and luckily for the most part, honestly, once you set it up and if you get it kind of within the range it's supposed to be, most mounts, especially ceiling mounts, you can still manipulate those mounts to kind of get it exactly where you want. So getting
sure,
it lined up and square to a screen is not hard. It's really not. It's just more
yeah.
of a kind of like it's more of a personal issue for me. It's a me problem, basically.
Okay. So another feature of this projector 7 that you mentioned, and you said it before, is the HDMI 2.1 support. Um,
Yes.
and for those who may not understand why that's important, maybe you can explain that a little bit and how it helps match up to current generation consoles for gaming and that type of thing. What it
Yeah.
brings to the table.
Yeah. So like if someone is a gamer, this is really only like a gamer type thing.
Okay.
I mean, HDMI 2.1 has a lot of features associated with it, things like QMS, like quick media switching and stuff like that. That's not present on this.
Okay.
You do have ALLM, so auto low latency mode, basically saying that if it senses that it is a game console or it's a game, it will automatically go into its low latency mode so that you'll get lower input latency. And then for HDMI 2.1, one of the things about it is that you can support higher frame rates. So generally, you might see dedicated gaming projectors where they'll say it will do like X milliseconds at 120 hertz. But a lot of times in those cases, that's 120 hertz at 1080p, or it might be, say, 240 hertz at 1080p. Um, it's not super common with those projectors where you can get actual like true 4K at 120 hertz. So with PS5, PS5 Pro, Xbox Series X, a Switch 2, and a higher end game, even a mid range gaming PC, actually. Well, I guess even with today's hardware, you could even have like a pretty entry level gaming PC, and you could still do 4K 120. So the idea is that you can connect any of these gaming devices to it, um, send it 4K at 120 hertz, and get lower input latency, which is what you're going to feel when you're playing a game. So if you press the button for someone to say jump, and it happens like almost instantaneously, you have low latency. If you press the button and he doesn't jump right away, he jumps like, you know, almost like say a second or so later, like you'll feel that when you're moving around, you'll feel that within the gameplay. So the benefit is that it has super low latency at 4K 120, and that's because they had HDMI 2.1 added to this series, which
Okay.
was missing from the previous. So
And then you also talk about 48 hertz support, which is the refresh rate,
yes,
which um, to kind of explain that, we get into a lot of numbers, and it kind of fries my brain. But it's
yeah,
you're talking about basically a more even motion, so you don't have the judder aspects or
right.
flaws in that. So when do you experience that? Is it through regular video? That's not a gaming thing. That's regular actual video,
Yeah,
right?
that would generally be regular video, and that has to be with something that sends that frame rate. So generally, when you're watching a movie, you're getting 24 frames per second. So that's what it
Yeah.
is, like frames per
Yeah.
second,
So
right?
this 48 is the proper step up from that, as opposed to 60, which is where you get kind of not matching. It's an
Right.
uneven match.
And that's when you need to start doing things like pull down,
Yes.
like 3-2
235,
pull down and stuff like that, right?
232.
So
Yeah.
when you're with 48, you're basically just doubling it. It's going to look a little bit smoother. You don't have to worry about things like pull down. Now, obviously, you have to have something that's going to send something at 48 hertz. So a good example would be MadVR. So like
Mm-hmm.
a MadVR has the ability, if you have their higher end model, to use effectively what's called motion AI, which is motion interpolation. And you can choose to send a 24 hertz or 24 FPS signal in a 48 hertz container. And you can send it to like one of these projectors. So if you did that, you can use that motion interpolation to have like a smoother looking motion.
Mm.
So that's one of the examples of it. Now, chances of someone necessarily pairing this projector with one of those particular units that can do it, it might be, it's not uncommon. Like it definitely happens. It's not super, super common though, but
Yeah.
it's kind of unlikely. But
Because
like
the
it
Mad
does
VR
apply.
adds so much more price to the equation. Is that what you
Yeah,
mean?
exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
like you're looking at something that costs more than the projector that is
Okay.
itself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
For the one that can do the motion AI. But
Yeah.
now this same thing applies though to say the Bravia 8 and Bravia 9, where a pairing of that is pretty common actually.
Okay.
So like the 48 hertz is not something everyone would use, but for the fact that they have it available is nice because certain other models, like their competitors,
Mm-hmm.
can't either do it at all, or there's very specific things that you have to do in order for it to do it. So
Okay. Now, from what's not available, you mentioned there's no HDR 10 plus support. So, why would we want this support, and what do you lose by not having it in this projector?
So, I mean, their tone mapping is pretty good by itself. Usually, when it comes to HDR 10 plus, it's very similar to basically Dolby Vision. It's basically the open source version of Dolby Vision. Is really
Right.
what it is. Um, so certain pieces of content can support HDR 10 plus. It can have a slightly different grade. It could have, meaning that like it can have been mastered at a certain level. Certain things can be different in terms of the highlights. It could be slightly different in terms of maybe some of like the color. It really shouldn't be anything with the coloring, but it could be. So you might actually have access to a better version in some cases if you had to choose between, say, a HDR10 plus, Dolby Vision, HDR10. Like say that the HDR10 Plus and the Dolby Vision could be the better of the versions. So not having it is not like a huge detriment to them. It's just something that would be nice to have. And also it creates parity to a point because generally their competitors in this price range all support it. So when people look at a lot of things like that, like myself, not necessarily because I generally use a video processor, or not generally, I use a video processor. But when people don't have that, they weigh certain things like that heavily. And there's also like a fear of missing out, even if it's not necessarily something they would really need, they still want it. And when you don't necessarily need to be completely at parity with your competition, but when you look at it as a whole, right? Like I have this option A, option B, option C. Option A and option B have it, option C doesn't. Option A, option B has this, option C doesn't. It starts to make the value proposition for some people skew more over towards A and B and stop looking at C because it's like, well, it doesn't do this and it doesn't do this. Even if performance wise they're roughly the same, it's still something that they could just have a checkbox on, right? So it's
Yeah,
not a
sure.
huge deal that doesn't exist, or not that it doesn't exist, that they don't have it. It would just be nice to
Sure.
have.
So we've covered a lot of the main points, but I want to kind of go through just briefly your experience with the performance out of the box. You mentioned that the Bravia 7's measured out of the box similar to other projectors you've worked on in the past. And the goal from Sony, as I'm sure most major manufacturers, is to have great performance out of the box, because they don't expect the folks majority. They said 90% of installations are not calibrated, and they rely on the factory settings, which you work with an exclusive group of people that are into getting it the best they can get, which is great. But there's still opportunity for improving. So you mentioned the thing that you kind of hit a lot of times, which is that excessive blue aspect. So maybe just talk about some of your initial observations from content, maybe right out of the gate, before you even started getting into all the settings and changing things.
Yeah, so out of the gate, like it looks good. So I could tell that there was a little too blue. But the good thing is that if you're going to be anything between being too blue, too green, too red, you always want to be too blue. And that's just because it's a denser color. It's harder for us to see. It makes things look a little bit cooler. It makes whites look a very specific way. I almost want to say it makes whites look like really, really clean, I guess is kind of like the best way to describe it.
Now, do they particularly try to add a little bit more for brightness, perceived brightness, maybe, or what? Why would that happen, do you think?
So in their case, I don't think it's for perceived brightness. I think it's because of their color matching function, and for what they use to try to match their reference monitors. That's part of it. But then even if that were the case, it still has a lot more blue within like the mid region, which if it were more accurate, it would still lean towards blue, but it would be flat, and it's not flat in terms of its grayscale tracking.
Okay.
Now, some manufacturers do add either blue or green because it makes things look brighter. So like a lot of times when we do measurements for like lumens, and you go into the mode that would be used for that, it's either going to be very blue or very green.
Yeah.
But that's not the case for them, because this is like that through everything.
Okay.
But I mean, it looked good. It was very sharp. It still had some of the little quirks that they've had for years, which is not a huge, if everyone knows what they are and they're okay with it, then they're okay with it, right? It's like they have a little bit of posterization. Like you see like certain things that are still there, but it looked good. It looked like a Sony. I guess that's what I could say. It looked like a Sony. But I was actually really surprised at how sharp it was. It was a very sharp projector, sharp lens on it.
Okay.
Very, very quiet. So look good.
Yeah, and so you go through calibration. One of the things I kind of have a question about after doing ISF training is you offer ideal sort of settings, correcting all these things that, not all these things, but you like correcting for the blue and that type of thing. How much is the room different rooms affecting your calibration numbers? Like as far as you set it up in a certain way, is this for a completely dark room? Does it, if someone just said, I'm going to go in and follow Sammie's calibration numbers exactly, will they get the exact same performance if they're in a room that's a little bit different than yours? Like, how much does that play into it?
The room will play into it, as well as just straight unit to unit variance.
True.
So no two units are exactly the same. And then you also have the difference of screen. So even though I have a white screen, I have a Studio Tech G4 130. Someone might have a like a CMOR, like a PS, one of their perfectly smooth screens, like a Radiant White, or someone might have like a Daylight. Someone might have a Elite screens or Silver Ticket or whatever. The issue with screens is that just because it's white, that really doesn't mean too much. So each screen has its own inherent bias to it. So even though this is about Sony, a good example of this is if someone goes to like say the JVC screen, so they have like a theater optimizer and they have a chart where it lists a bunch of screens and it has numbers that you would put into that projector. Those numbers represent red, green, and blue. And what they do is they offset the bias of that screen.
Hmm.
If all screens were the same, all the numbers would be the same, right? But they're not.
Yeah.
So like you'll have something where it's like, okay, this one's 240. So this is adding green and red, right? So even though the screen is white, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to look exactly the same. It'll probably be close, but it's going to have some differences to it.
Sure.
So RUM will play into it, screen will play into it, and then unit to unit variance will play into it.
Okay. Overall, your once you were calibrated and set up, you walk through your different content and different
Mhm.
sources, and the performance sounded like it was great. You know, you said that particularly like in Black Panther, you saw some a dark but dynamic kind of scene there with a convoy attack, and you said it was able to resolve fine details in the shadows without crushing blacks or washing out the image, which is what you're looking for from their performance that we just described in the beginning. So
Right.
you got a
Yeah.
lot of
So
what you're expecting there.
yeah, and that was the same thing that I experienced with the nines, and like the eights and everything like that. So with those, and this is again all due to the change in processing, because before, if you're
Yeah.
looking at like the previous series, it just wasn't as, it was kind of like lacking. It wasn't awful or anything like that. It was just it was lacking a little bit. This has showed that it has like elevated greatly. So perfect example at Cedia, a lot of times what some manufacturers will do is they'll take their projector and compare it to another person's projector. But what Sony did is they actually took this projector and compared it against their previous series, because it is that much of a difference.
Yeah, that was interesting. I saw that as well when we were in New York, and that is a different way to do it. Yeah, just to kind of wrap up, I think that anyone that wants to get into to the minutia of connections and different settings, they can do that in the actual written review. But you had a pretty succinct conclusion, which we mostly covered. Do you want to just hit like a kind of an overall feeling on the Projector 7 and feelings about performance, highlights, and things that are just maybe the limitations of it? Then we can kind of wrap it up.
I think that it is a really good projector. They definitely exceeded the performance of their 5000. Like they did really well, and they added like thoughtful features. So like you can actually use this with a scope screen and never have to like really worry, where before you couldn't really do that unless you had an external device like a video processor. Now they made it so it's like this is a viable option. Um, in addition to that, it's probably one of the better gaming projectors in this class that you can get, because 11 milliseconds of latency at 4K 120, um, that's not common at this tier of projectors. And this applies to all of the Bravia projectors. So it's Bravia 7, 8, and 9. So it's arguably one of the better gaming projectors. The tone mapping, huge improvement, like massive improvement from what it was before. Um, it's overall, it's a good projector, and it is, even though I probably sounded like negative in some of the things I was saying in this, it is actually relative price wise to where it should be due to along its competitors. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not like um, grossly overpriced or anything like that. It is where it should be when you're looking at who you are comparing it against, um, price to performance wise. So it is a good option. And even then, they still offer the 5000. That's still, this serves as the entry level. But if you really want something that's going to give you good tone mapping, nice feature set in terms of like gaming performance and just a little nice to have like the 48 hertz stuff like that, then this is definitely worth a look at least.
Yeah, and I guess we never really said the lumen output, which was 2200, correct?
Yeah, and
around
I
there.
think I came in. I think I was. This has been a while since I did. I want to say I was maybe like 4% lower in
Yeah,
terms of
just
what
a
I
little
measured.
bit.
Yeah. So, which is still good because the tolerance is 20%. Like someone
Sure.
can give a measurement of, oh, we're X amount of lumens, and they can be within like a 20% range of that, and it still be kind of okay.
Yeah.
They're at 4%, and
Yeah.
that's casual lumen measurement. So you have to account for just error in general, right? So
Sure.
it could be closer than that actually. So
And your comparison there to the nine, which you reviewed last year, the $35,000 MSRP nine is 3,400 lumens. So, you can see the difference there and just overall brightness for the
yeah,
price point difference as well. Not terrible. And okay, so great review. Thank you so much for that. It felt like forever between when I sort of saw it for the first time, I believe back in March, to when we did the review not too long ago. So um, things take a minute, but glad we got that one done. And you've got some others in the queue that are exciting,
yeah.
non-Sony projectors, ones that also we've been waiting with bated breath for, specifically the Hisense L9Q ultra short throw, which a lot of folks have been interested in, and the Valerian Vision Master Max, which a lot of people from the more lifestyle kind of space are super excited about. So
Cool.
don't want to give anything away, but those are both in hand now, right?
Yeah. So I have both of those as well as another one also.
You want to tell me what the other one is? I forget what the other one
It's
was.
the
We had.
the Epson Grand.
Oh, right. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, we've got some
So
interesting lifestyle projectors coming out of Epson that are fun to talk about. So the Life Studio line, which we did a sort of a news release on, but we're gonna get our first reviews from you, and Nikki's going to do one as well about one of the kind of more fun sort of party type of projectors that Epson's come out with. So some fun stuff
yeah,
coming up, right?
yeah, yeah. And I don't know if I have any. I think I might have something else coming. Maybe a X Jimmy possibly.
Oh, right. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well,
So
lots more to come from Sammie. Thank you so much for taking so much time today, and keep doing what you're doing. It's great to read your reviews.
cool. Appreciate it.
Sammie Prescott lives in Colorado Springs, where he is a QA software engineer, ISF level 3 professional calibrator, and of course, frequent reviewer at ProjectorCentral.com, where you can read not only his review of the Bravia Projector 7, but also the recent reviews of the BenQ W4100i, the Epson QS100, and many, many more. And that wraps up today's show, which was produced by Projector Central. Please subscribe to the Projector Podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. Also, check out all the latest Projector product news and reviews at ProjectorCentral.com, where you can also subscribe to receive email notifications about our articles on the day that they are posted. For Sammie Prescott and Projector Central, I'm Jeremy Glowacki. Thanks for listening.